All right, get ready, because we're going to dive into something pretty controversial happening in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about these changing demographics over there, and
Okay.
especially the anxieties around Muslim immigration. We're going to use this audio clip called Illegals Plucking the Roads to Hijack Trucks as kind of our roadmap today.
Hmm. Sounds intense.
It is. It really is. It doesn't hold back at all.
Well, good. I mean, that's what makes it so useful for us. We need to really get past those surface level headlines and figure out what's really driving these anxieties and
Yeah,
what could actually happen. What are the possible consequences?
right. So, set the scene for me. What's actually happening on the ground over there?
Hmm.
Because the audio clip throws out some pretty wild stats. Honestly, some of this stuff kind of stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that really stuck out to me was, in London, now, white Britons are actually a minority.
Right.
And Birmingham is headed in the same direction. They're saying white families, they're going to be a minority pretty soon, too, for the first time ever.
Yeah. No, that's a big shift.
It
For
is.
sure. And it's not just about the numbers themselves, right? It's about what those numbers mean
Yeah.
to different groups of people. In fact, the audio clip even mentions this phrase, the Great Replacement. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I don't think so.
It was actually coined by this French writer, Renaud Camus.
Okay.
And it's rooted in this whole white nationalist ideology. But the idea is that there's this deliberate effort, this orchestrated plan almost to replace native European populations
With,
with non-European immigrants.
wow. Whether people believe it's a conspiracy or not, that's a pretty heavy concept to throw around. I can see how an idea like that could really fuel anxiety and fear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It really taps into this primal fear that people have of losing control. Like their culture, their identity is being eroded, like it's being overtaken by something else. And you hear that reflected all over the audio clip.
Yeah, there's some pretty intense voices in there, people expressing a lot of concern about, well, a lot of things. One is this idea of Sharia law, replacing existing legal systems. And then also just this more general anxiety that, traditional European values and culture are just being eroded.
It's interesting though, because if you think about, Europe's history, it's always been like this mix, this melting pot of different cultures and influences.
Right.
So this whole concept of a singular, unchanging European identity
Yeah.
is kind of more of a myth than reality.
So maybe these anxieties, maybe they're more about change in general
Hmm.
than any specific group.
That's a great question, and I'm not sure there's an easy answer.
Right.
But it is something to think about. What we can say for sure is that this audio clip really taps into this feeling, this unease that a lot of people are feeling about how fast their societies are changing.
Okay, so let's break down some of those specific anxieties that we hear in the clip.
Okay.
One that I kept coming back to was this concern about Sharia law.
Uh-huh.
The idea that it's going to replace existing legal systems in Europe.
Hmm.
Is that actually a real concern?
Well, it depends.
Or is it more just like a fear-mongering tactic?
It's important to think about the difference between what could theoretically happen
Yeah.
versus what's actually likely to happen. So Sharia law, it's complicated, right? It's this religious law that governs a lot of aspects of Muslim life, but in most European countries, it doesn't have any legal standing at all.
Okay, so it's more of a hypothetical fear than an actual threat.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's a fear that often gets, exploited by people who want to stir up anti-Muslim feelings. The reality is that, most Muslims living in Europe, they want to integrate into society. They want to follow the laws of the country they live in.
The audio clip also includes some pretty strong quotes about violence and terrorism,
Uh-huh.
obviously being linked to extremist ideologies.
Yeah.
So how do we even begin to separate those legitimate concerns about security
Hmm.
from just straight up prejudice against an entire religion?
That's a really important distinction to make.
It is.
Because, terrorism is a real threat, and it's understandable that people are worried about it. But we can't forget the vast majority of Muslims, they condemn terrorism and extremism just as much as anyone else.
So painting all Muslims as potential terrorists, it's not just inaccurate,
Right.
it's dangerous.
Very dangerous. It creates this climate of fear and suspicion that makes it almost impossible to even talk about this stuff rationally.
Right.
And it can lead to real discrimination,
Yeah.
even violence against people who have done nothing wrong.
The audio clip also mentions that ban on burqas in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
Some people see that as necessary to protect women's rights.
right.
Others see it as discriminatory. a violation of religious freedom.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to navigate something that's so complex and sensitive?
I mean, that's a perfect example of how nuanced these issues can be and how they bring up strong emotions on both sides. The burqa ban, it's a legal issue. It's a social issue. There are arguments for it and against it, and it's really important to avoid those like sweeping statements
Yeah.
about either side and just try to focus on, encouraging dialogue and understanding between different communities.
So it sounds like there's a real need for honest, open communication, but also this understanding that, like, there might not be easy answers here.
Yeah, it's not about finding the right answer or the wrong answer. It's more about having that thoughtful, respectful discussion
Right.
where you acknowledge how complex the issues are.
The audio clip, it's interesting because, like, while it's full of anxieties from one perspective, it does include some different perspectives from within Muslim communities.
Mhm.
There are individuals in there who talk about wanting peaceful coexistence, integration, rejecting extremism.
Those voices are so important to include in this conversation. It's important to, push back against those stereotypes and misconceptions that
Right.
really fuel prejudice and discrimination.
And I think it's important to remember we're talking about individuals here,
Right.
not just like big groups.
Of course, yeah. I mean, within any population, you're going to find all sorts of different views and beliefs. So to say that, all Muslims think the same way or share the same values,
Yeah.
it's just not accurate and it's not helpful.
There are also people in the clip advocating for, like, understanding and support for refugees,
Hmm.
highlighting the humanitarian crisis that's forcing a lot of these people to seek asylum in Europe in the first place.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Behind all the statistics and the political arguments, there are real people.
Yeah.
They're fleeing from war or persecution, or they're just trying to escape from extreme poverty. And it's easy to get so caught up in all the anxiety around immigration that we forget about those human stories.
Right. Okay, so we've got this mix of anxieties and then these counter narratives. But the clip also acknowledges that, like, even with the best intentions, integrations isn't always easy.
No, it's not. There are challenges on both sides. Newcomers, they have to adjust to a new culture,
Right.
find jobs, learn the language.
Right.
And, the communities they're moving into, they may be struggling to adjust to a more diverse society.
So it sounds like successful integration, it really requires effort from everyone involved.
Yeah, totally. It's about creating a society where everyone feels valued, respected, and able to contribute.
Right.
And that takes time. It takes patience, and it takes a willingness to bridge those cultural divides.
Okay, we've talked about some of the anxieties, the counter narratives, but we can't talk about this without acknowledging the political side of it, can we?
Oh, no, 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 not at all. This is a huge political flashpoint all across Europe.
The audio clip actually even mentions Angela Merkel
Oh,
specifically
yeah.
and how her decision back in 2015 to open Germany's borders to refugees that sparked praise from some people
Of course.
and intense criticism from others. And it just shows how divided people are on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect example of how polarizing this stuff can be.
Yeah.
And how often politicians will use it, to get support or push their own agendas.
So how do we make sure that these anxieties aren't just being used for political gain
Yeah.
and are actually being addressed in a way that benefits everyone?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
It requires, a level of political leadership that unfortunately we don't always see. We need leaders who can, articulate a vision for a society that's more inclusive and cohesive.
Yeah.
Who can, address people's concerns but also promote tolerance and understanding at the same time. It's tough.
Okay, so let's step back from those immediate reactions and the political back and forth
Okay.
and think a little deeper about this. The audio clip brings up this interesting tool.
Oh, yeah.
It's called the collapse simulator.
I've heard of that.
It was developed by Ubisoft. Now it's based on a video game, but it actually uses real-world data
Interesting.
to model how those societal systems, how they can actually break down under stress.
Right.
And while it's not specifically about immigration, it does raise some questions about how all these different systems in a society are connected
Right.
and how they can be affected by these big demographic changes. So is it basically like a warning sign, like, hey, if we don't get a handle on this stuff, things could really go off the rails?
I wouldn't say it's like predicting doom or anything,
Okay.
but it is a call to action,
Yeah.
It says, hey, it's important to be prepared, to have, strong systems in place that can handle unexpected crises.
Hmm.
Whether those are caused by, I don't know, pandemics
Yeah.
or natural disasters,
Right.
or potentially these large-scale social or demographic shifts.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot here. The anxieties around Muslim immigration, the political dimensions, the possible consequences of these demographic changes. But I gotta say, I'm still kind of stuck on the title of that audio clip. Illegals blocking the roads to hijack trucks. What's the story there? What were they trying to hijack, and why?
That's a good question, and we're definitely going to unpack that specific incident and what it means in the bigger picture in part 2 of our deep dive, so stay tuned. Yeah, that title, Illegals Blocking the Roads to Hijack Trucks, it's definitely meant to grab your attention.
Yeah, it does.
It makes you think about, like, chaos,
Hmm.
lawlessness.
Yeah, but the audio clip itself doesn't really explain, like, what actually happened.
Right.
So what's the story there? What were they trying to hijack?
Well, if you kind of piece together what they say in the clip and do a little more research,
Yeah.
it seems like they're talking about these incidents where groups of migrants, often, feeling desperate,
Yeah.
disillusioned, they were trying to stop trucks on these major highways across Europe.
Okay, so not like hijacking, like stealing the whole truck,
No,
but more like trying to force their way on.
exactly. Trying to get a ride, basically. Be smuggled across borders, reach a destination where they think they'll have a better life.
Yeah, I could see how that would cause a lot of disruption
Mm.
and fear, especially for the truck drivers who are being targeted.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the audio clip really plays on that fear, right? It uses these incidents to paint this picture of migrants as like this threat
Hmm.
to public safety and order. And it feeds into all those anxieties we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
about borders being overrun and systems breaking down.
It's interesting, though, how the audio clip connects these incidents with, the calls for Sharia law and the warnings about Muslim domination.
Right.
It's like they're trying to create this link between migration and this, like, threat to Western civilization.
Yeah, you're picking up on something really important there. That's a tactic that's used a lot by people who are trying to exploit those anxieties about immigration
Yeah.
for political gain. They create this narrative, us versus them,
Mm-hmm.
where migrants, and especially Muslim migrants, are portrayed as this like existential threat to European culture and values.
So it goes beyond just, like, economic concerns or worries about social services being stretched thin. It becomes like this apocalyptic vision
Right.
of a Europe overrun by Islam.
Exactly. And that kind of talk, it can be really dangerous
Yeah,
because it dehumanizes migrants
right.
and it creates a climate of fear and intolerance.
The audio clip also spends a good chunk of time talking about the problems that countries like Sweden are facing.
Yeah.
They've been pretty open to immigration, and the clip highlights concerns about crime rates, declining test scores in schools, that kind of thing, a strain on social services.
Those are legitimate concerns. Any country that takes in a lot of immigrants is going to have challenges
Yeah.
integrating those newcomers into society.
But is it fair to say that, like, all of those problems are because of immigration?
That's where things get complicated because blaming complex social issues, things like crime or how kids are doing in school,
Right.
solely on immigration, that's just too simple. It's often misleading. There are always a lot of factors at play.
So how do we, like, separate all those factors and have a more nuanced conversation about what immigration's real impact is?
Well, you have to look at the data,
Mhm.
the evidence, instead of just relying on stories or generalizations,
Yeah.
We need to look at the research, the statistics, the long-term trends. For example, the audio clip talks about this 15% increase in violent crime in Sweden since 2010.
Yeah, they do.
But it leaves out the fact that crime rates there were actually dropping steadily for years before that.
So we need to look at the bigger picture,
Right.
not just focus on things that support a certain narrative.
Exactly. And you got to watch out for claims that just confirm what you already believe,
Yeah.
The audio clip also talks about this rape epidemic in Sweden.
Yeah.
That's linked to immigration, but that claim has been debunked over and over by
Yeah.
fact checkers and researchers. So,
It seems like there's a lot of misinformation out there and fear-mongering, shaping how people see immigration.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to think critically.
Yeah.
Be skeptical of information that just plays into your prejudices. Be willing to look at different perspectives.
It's also important to remember that there are, like, positive stories about immigration, too.
Right.
Stories about people integrating successfully, contributing to their new communities,
Yeah.
cultural enrichment, all that.
You're right. Immigration has historically been a source of energy and new ideas for Europe, bringing in new skills, new perspectives, and those contributions often get lost in all the negativity.
So how do we, like, change that?
Mm.
How do we highlight the good stuff Without ignoring the challenges.
It's about finding that balance, right? Having an honest conversation
Yeah.
where you acknowledge both the benefits and the challenges of immigration. It's about recognizing that diversity can be a strength, not a weakness,
Hmm.
and that building a shared future means that we have to respect each other and be willing to embrace change.
Okay, but the audio clip also paints this pretty dark picture of the future. Predictions about Europe becoming, like, dominated by Islam and Western civilization crumbling.
Right. But those predictions are usually based on, fear of the unknown, nostalgia for a simpler past, and just a lack of faith in our ability to adapt and change as societies.
But the truth is, societies are always changing, right? It's the only constant.
Exactly. And the future of Europe, it's not set in stone. It depends on the choices we make today, on how we respond to the challenges and the
Of these
opportunities.
demographic shifts.
Right.
So how do we make sure that we're making those choices with, like, wisdom and compassion and not fear and prejudice?
That's the question we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll look at some potential solutions, some strategies,
Okay.
paths forward that might help us deal with these issues in a way that benefits everyone in Europe.
Okay, I'm really curious to hear what those solutions might be. Stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back for the final part of our deep dive into Europe's changing demographics. So we've spent the last two parts really digging into those anxieties around Europe's changing demographics,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to Muslim immigration.
right.
But I feel like we've been kind of circling this big question of where do we go from here?
It's the question, right? Everyone's trying to figure it out, and it's not about just like finding some quick fix or blaming someone.
Yeah.
It's about really understanding how complicated all this is
Yeah.
and finding solutions that are both, practical but also humane.
Okay, so let's talk about those possible solutions. What can actually be done to make this work?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up is that we need a better approach to immigration policy across the EU, like a more coordinated one. This whole patchwork of different national policies,
Yeah.
it's just not working.
So ditch the every country for itself thing and work together as a continent.
Exactly. We need like clearer rules for asylum seekers, make
Yeah.
it easier for people to migrate legally, and really crack down on those human trafficking rings.
That makes sense. A more unified approach. It could help address those worries about, uncontrolled migration,
Right.
but also make sure that people who really need protection are treated fairly.
Exactly. But it's not just about policy, right? We also have to think about integration.
Right.
Like, how do we help newcomers actually become part of society,
Yeah.
contributing, economically, socially, culturally?
It's more than just learning the language, right?
Oh, for sure. It's about really belonging,
Yeah.
feeling accepted, valued, like you're part of the community.
And that takes effort from both sides.
It does. Governments can help, providing language classes, job training, supporting those initiatives that bring cultures together. But we also need to change attitudes.
That's the hard part, isn't it?
It is getting rid of those ingrained prejudices, creating a welcoming environment. It's not easy,
No.
but it's essential. And that's where things like education come in
Yeah.
and interfaith dialogue, breaking down those harmful stereotypes, helping different communities understand each other better,
Right.
and maybe even, dare I say, nurturing a sense of shared European identity,
Hmm.
one that embraces diversity.
That kind of echoes what we heard in the audio clip, right? That whole clash of civilizations idea.
Yeah.
So tackling that head on through education and open dialogue, that seems really key.
It is. It's about changing the story, moving away from fear and division towards unity and hope, focusing on those things we all share, those values, those experiences
Right.
that connect us as human beings, no matter our background or our beliefs.
But we also can't ignore the economic side of this, can we?
Nope.
People are worried about jobs, about social services being stretched too thin.
Those are real concerns.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that immigration policies benefit everyone, not just newcomers.
Right.
So that could mean, focusing on attracting skilled migrants, filling those gaps in the job market, investing in education and training for everyone,
Right.
and dealing with that whole issue of undeclared work so that everyone's contributing fairly.
So it's not about shutting down immigration completely. It's about managing it
Yeah.
thoughtfully, strategically.
Exactly. And remember, immigration can be a good thing for the economy.
Right.
It can bring new businesses, new ideas, a more diverse workforce, all that.
It sounds like it all comes down to finding that balance, managing immigration in a way that helps everyone, newcomers and people who have been there for generations.
Yeah, that's really it. Creating a future where everyone feels like they belong, where everyone has opportunities, and where everyone feels safe.
No matter where they came from.
Right.
So that audio clip ended on a pretty dark note with that quote from The Division, that video game,
Right.
about society collapsing. Do you think all of this, the challenges, the anxieties, all this stuff we've been talking about, do you think it really puts Europe at risk?
I think it reminds us of how quickly things can fall apart when fear and mistrust take over.
Hmm.
And even though it's just a game, it shows us how important it is to have strong institutions,
Yeah.
to have a sense of community, and to work together to solve these problems.
So what should our listener be thinking about as they, go about their lives and encounter these hues in their own communities?
Well, I think the most important thing is to choose understanding over fear,
Hmm.
to choose dialogue over division,
Yeah.
to remember that we're all part of this story, this mix of cultures and experiences that makes Europe what it is.
It's about embracing that complexity, having those tough conversations, and remembering that we need empathy, compassion, and a willingness to find common ground.
Well said. This isn't about easy answers. It's about all of us working together to build a Europe that's both strong and compassionate,
Yeah.
prosperous and just, and it starts with each of us.
This has been the Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.